What can you do after getting a PhD in psychology? Hello, hello! I'm Arunima Sarin, and today we'll talk about what you can do after getting your PhD in psychology. In other words, we'll talk about the most common career paths taken by those who have a PhD in psychology. Let's get into it. So the most common thing that people do after getting a PhD in psychology is take up a postdoctoral position, also called postdocs. Now, these postdoc positions are independent research positions almost. You work in a lab with a PI, but a majority of your time is devoted to doing your own research. These are fantastic for helping graduate students, recently graduated graduate students, establish their research niche, deepen their expertise, often learn new skills. The biggest challenge with postdocs, though, is finding the right funding. Now, in most cases, the funding comes from either the PI of the lab, because they'll just have money lying around, or they applied for a grant, or the postdoctoral student themselves have to write a grant, sometimes independently, sometimes in collaboration with the PI. Sometimes you can find postdoc positions where you have to do a lot of teaching, and that's where you get your stipend from. So that's finding funding is a big challenge. But these are the most common type of positions after a PhD program, in part because they offer a really nice continuation. You finally get to really exploit the skills that you have been learning and building over the course of your PhD, and it's a really nice bridge between being a student and developing your research identity and then really kind of drilling it in, doing a lot of research. They're especially popular if you want to go into academia. But that's not always the case. Oftentimes, people will finish their PhD, do a postdoc, and then in that process decide that they want to explore opportunities outside of academia. So it even works for that, right? It's a really nice continuation of everything you've learned. You get an opportunity to use it, to build on those skills, and then you have a moment to decide whether you want to continue down the academic route or explore alternatives. A career path kind of related to a postdoctoral position, but not quite, is taking up an independent research fellowship after finishing your PhD. So I've often seen people take these up, and they've actually become more and more common in the recent years, especially amongst those who really enjoy academia and want to stay within its ambit. So they still want to do research, but they don't want to get involved in the race to get an academic position. Now, I have found that research fellowships often are better paid than postdocs, especially in some subfields of psychology. So recently, so many research fellowships have come up within human AI institutes. It's really just a position that you take up because you enjoy the research you want to do and you kind of want to keep doing it. And they're very much like a postdoc, just that you aren't doing them as a stepping stone to apply to a faculty position or, as a part-time thing to leave. You're just doing them for the sake of doing them. A second really common path for psychology PhD students is to go into what we call industry. Now, there's no actual clear definition of what accounts as industry. So I'll give you mine, which is I've heard people refer to jobs that are academia adjacent as industry roles. What that means is jobs or roles that require you to use all of the kinds of skills that you've learned as a graduate student that have been important and valuable as a graduate student, but instead of putting them to use to do research on your topic, you put them to do research for a specific company that's trying to solve a specific problem. Common examples are behavioral research for any kind of big firms, big tech firms, big pharma firms, designing psychological measurements and assessments for private firms, doing research to make suggestions on public policy, doing data science broadly across different sectors. And so all of these roles are often called industry roles because you're really using the skills that you would as a a postdoctoral researcher in an academic institution, but your goal to use those is different, right? You're not doing it to progress your own research or your PI's research, but really to help whatever company you're working for, their mission, to solve a particular problem. And again, there's so much variety in the type of role you can do. There's a lot of research showing that in recent years, the move from students staying in academia to shifting into industry has been increasing. So it seems like a really common thing that people are doing. And I think a huge part, a key reason for that, like these positions are becoming increasingly common. And a key reason for that is you get to make a lot more money. So, your day-to-day looks very much like it does if you were a grad student, a postdoc, you're doing research, you're reading papers, you're analyzing your data in R or Python, just for different ends. But your day-to-day is very similar, and you have better work-life balance, you are getting paid a lot more than you would in academia. So there's loads of pros to it. There's obviously some cons, but it seems to be an increasingly popular choice amongst those who have a PhD in psychology. Another really popular choice amongst those who have a PhD in psychology is to go into consulting. Now, consulting feels like this big catch-all phrase because there are so many different types of consulting that you can do. But across those differences, across those types, there are certain key characteristics that you need to have if you want to excel at the job. Some of these include being good at problem solving, thinking critically and creatively, having good analytical skills, having good communication skills. Now, someone with a PhD in psychology gets trained in all of these, right? We get extensive experience doing all of this. And so typically psychology PhD students are valued very highly as consultants. Now, there's loads of different types of consultancy that you can get into, depending on your interest and the skills that you most enjoy working with. Some really popular common ones are workforce consulting, organizational effectiveness consulting, business development and strategic consulting, education consulting, behavior analyst. Honestly, the list goes on and on and on. Like industry jobs, consultants, moving into consultancy has also become really popular. I think in huge part because of better pay and because getting academic jobs like becoming an assistant professor is just so hard. There's so many people who want those jobs and such little jobs. So it seems like a really great career route if depending on what your goals are. Another thing you can do after graduating with a PhD in psychology is start your own business. I have often felt that being a PhD student is kind of like running your startup, right? You have this business idea, which is your research niche, your particular perspective on science, and you're running the show. You have to do everything from start to finish. You have to figure out all aspects of the process. You are tight on resources and time. You're perpetually tired. But you believe in your dream and you're working for it relentlessly. And so it really feels like doing a PhD program is kind of like running a startup. You're trying to build your own version and your own perspective on science and establish a point of view. And so I feel like if you have a PhD in psychology, you really have the necessary skills, the training, the perseverance, the grit to get it done. We know what it takes to think about an idea and then build it and see it through to completion, much like it does with a startup. So I feel like that's a really exciting possible career path forward. I've seen some people who have PhDs in psychology take that route, and the common topics, the common business ideas I've seen come out of that process center around mental health, behavioral research, behavioral insights, and also human AI intelligence, interaction, that space. Obviously, you can, start your business and build a startup and whatever. But the point is, I think that you, with a PhD in psychology, you would have the relevant skills to choose that path forward. All right, so there we have it. Some of the most common career paths after a PhD in psychology. If you know someone who might benefit from hearing this, please forward it to them. Check out my website for more academia-related content and stay tuned for more videos. See you next time.